Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of the Inside Voice podcast. Bear with me. I'm telling you, just getting set up to film this has been a time. Let's just put it that way. My ring light that I use for my main light fell over on the table that I put my recording device, which is my laptop, and then it fell onto my dog's bed and it freaked him out. This light over here was not working. It kept falling down. It's been a thing. On top of all of that, this has just been one of those weeks where it feels like everything that I have tried to do creatively has just been dumb. I work in broadcast and it's the words aren't working. They're not coming out the way that they need to. I'm stumbling over words, don't have clear thoughts. This is going to be a fun one. So just bear with me. It's also the time that I decided, you know what? I'm going to try a scarf today. Because this is what the girls are doing now. Gen Z, they're wearing these silk scarves around their necks and they're so cute. So I decided to try to do that. Helpful hints, tips, hacks, anything you've got, let me know. Because I don't know what I'm doing with this situation around my neck. If you're not watching on YouTube, it's probably a good thing. But welcome in. Hi, so glad to be here with you. As always, we like to start off our podcast with some good news. And unfortunately, our good news stems from bad news. If you've been following the World Cup, you know that the United States is out. They lost to Belgium. Bad. I don't know much about soccer, but these games as of late, they've been close. You don't score a lot in soccer. So when you lose to somebody 4-1, it's not good. And there was just something about this team. As soon as they stepped out on the field, you could just tell that the U.S. team did not have it. They had made the moment bigger than it needed to be. It was a big moment and it was they realized how big it was and then they froze. They were just playing really tight. That is besides the point. US is out. I like to joke that it feels like now with all these visitors here for the World Cup, it's we were so excited for them all to be here. Almost like your family coming to visit for Christmas. And then now that Christmas Day is past and family's still here, it's just not the same. It doesn't have the same luster to it. You know what I mean? But the good news is, one of our key players for our U.S. team is Folarin Balogun. I looked up how to pronounce his name. Balogun, I believe is how you pronounce it. I mean, he's phenomenal. And there was a lot of drama about whether or not he was going to play against Belgium because of this red card that probably should have never been a red card in the first place, blah, blah, blah. He did play. The U.S. lost. But what he did in that loss, and even what he did when he received a red card, just very stoic, very calm and cool and collected. This man does not lose his temper. And I feel like with the dramatics of soccer, the injuries, I'm putting that in air quotes, there's a lot of over the topness. And he could have blown up at the ref with that red card, but he didn't. He took it and walked off the field. And then the U.S. team loses. And what does he do? Well, he goes over to the head coach of the Belgium team to shake his hand. That Belgium coach wrapped him up in a big hug. They started chatting about some stuff. Who knows what they were saying. But just to watch the character that this man has, Folarin, as he goes to a team that just beat them. His dreams of winning a World Cup this year are dashed. But to have that level of humility, honor, respect, sportsmanship, to have that to go over to that team and say, hey, congratulations, y'all, you outplayed us. I'm sure that was part of the conversation, but to congratulate a team that just beat you, I got to tell you, in this day and age, in 2026, that is rare. I feel like we don't see that so much because everybody is so in this entitled era of if you do me wrong, you're dead to me. And if I lose, it's your fault. And I can find anything I want on the internet to back me up as to why I should have won. And you're a terrible person. And, blah, 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 blah. It's everything gets blown out of proportion. And sometimes I feel like the best thing that can happen to us in life is for us to take an L and to handle it well. This goes back to playing sports as a kid. I'm such an advocate for kids being in sports because it does teach you this level of sportsmanship and respect and just the ability to take a loss. It happens. It's going to happen in life as well. There's going to be trophies that you do not win. There are going to be days where you strike out, and that's okay. How do you bounce back from that? So keeping in tune with this sports analogy, keeping in tune with the theme of the World Cup and sports in general, I want to look at this year as if it's a full soccer game, or if it's a full football game or basketball game, like whatever resonates with you, as long as the sport has a halftime in it. Because I feel like right now, where we're at in 2026, with July being here, we are in a halftime. June, the end of June and the start of July, like that is the midpoint of the year. We have less than 6 months left in 2026. It is wild to think about that. And then you factor in the holidays, you factor in football season, you factor in pumpkin spice lattes, near and dear to my heart. You factor in all the things that happen, at the end of summer and fall and into the winter. It's going to feel a lot shorter than 6 months. So maybe we should have done this episode like at the beginning of June, but here we are sitting almost midway through July, and it is our halftime. And I think we should treat it as such. Now, I think for some people, they get to this point of summer vacation or even in the year and they think, I'll just enjoy the rest of the year. But then again, we set all of these goals at the beginning of the year. And now it's like, okay, well, if we haven't accomplished them, we'll just save them for next year. That's not going to get you where you want to be. If anything, that's just going to get you back to January, sitting down, writing the same old goals again and again and again, and not seeing any progress. I don't know about you, that's not how I want to live my life. I want to continually grow. I want to continue to progress. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm willing to bet there's a part of you that feels the same way. So what do we do moving forward? First of all, it's going to take a little bit of like some gear shifting here, especially coming off of last weekend, which was 4th of July, or the weekend before the last couple of days. I mean, that was a big celebration. And now it's like, okay, we've got to like dial back in and get ready to go back to real life, right? But above all, I think before we enter into this second half of the year, there's a few things that we need to do to set ourselves up for success. First and foremost, I want you to take a moment and pat yourself on the back. I want you to take a moment and thank yourself for showing up in the ways that you already have this year. I mean, let's face it, these first 6 months, there was a lot on your plate. You had a lot that you needed to juggle. There might have been something that happened that was catastrophic or euphoric, or there might have been, just little bumps along the way. And you're here. You're still standing. There's something to be said of that, okay? Regardless of what the scoreboard says, regardless if you are winning this year or losing this year, or if you're dead even, like you've made no progress, but you also haven't regressed, you've got to thank yourself for being where you're at now, because you're still standing, you're still pushing, and you're still putting a smile on your face every single day. So well done. Now, as we get ready for the second half of the year, which technically has already started, we're already like a couple weeks into that second half of the year, I want us to do a little halftime recap here, okay? Thinking back to the resolutions that you set. Remember, we did this whole thing of brainstorming and narrowing down and putting things into different categories and then picking one from each of the 3 categories. We had like a personal goal, we had a professional goal, and we had a passion goal. I want you to revisit those 3 things that you wrote down, okay? Have those in the back of your mind as we're going through this halftime, because it matters as we move forward. The first thing that we're gonna do, and if you played sports growing up, you know what a halftime is all about. You know that there are things that happen during halftime to set you up for success for the second half of the game. We're going to play along with 3 key things that happen in that halftime locker room before we attack the next 6 months, okay? The first is we're going to analyze the first half. We're going to analyze, quote unquote, game film. Now, I know you don't look at game film halftime in the middle of a game. That's something you reserve for, the Monday after the game or the next practice or something like that, because it's a little more intense. It's a little more labor intensive. But I want us to take a second and look at the first half of the game. How did we do? Okay, that's the very first thing. You got to know what happened in the first half of the game in order to understand what to do in the second half. Any good coach knows this because, you prepared for the game, you set intentions and strategies for the game, but then once you got in it, you might have realized like, this ain't working. This strategy that I had, this play that I wanted to run, this teammate that I wanted to hand the ball off to, it didn't work out the way that I expected it to. So now we have to look at that, recognize what went right, recognize what went wrong, and then make a new strategy for the second half of the year. So look at the first 6 months, January through June. Where were you successful? Where did you score some wins? And I suggest that you write this stuff down, like just pull out a piece of paper and just start jotting some stuff down. I think that will make it really helpful for you to organize your thoughts and kind of, draw up a new game plan. But sometimes just thinking about it is not enough. Like actually writing it down, it allows you to be honest with yourself. And it also is kind of like you're writing a contract to yourself of like, okay, these are the terms and conditions. This is what worked. This is what didn't. And here's how I'm going to move forward. Like there's just something very beneficial. It helps you organize your thoughts. There's a reason back in the day, as a millennial, they had you take notes during class. So again, look at the year. Where were the wins? Where did you find yourself being successful as far as your goals? When I look at the beginning of the year or I look at the first 6 months, I'll be honest with you, there's one goal that I've been really successful at. The other ones, not so much. The one that I've been really successful with is my personal goal of wanting to read the entire Bible. That is something I've never done. I wish I would have brought it in here in the studio with me, but I have a chronological Bible that I've been going through. It's a 1-year Bible, so it's broken down day by day. Here's the chunk you're going to read. And I've been so successful with that. I've stacked it on top of another habit that I have during the day that I'm very consistent with. And I have not that I haven't missed a day, but I am right on track with it. The times that I have missed, I've made it up, or I've prepared ahead of time for it. I've read ahead or caught up on reading later on, but that has been my most successful goal. So that is a win for me. The other ones, not so much. I wasn't as prepared or as I didn't have the best game plan to accomplish the other things. And we'll get into that as we get into our regroup. But right now, we're just writing down, where did we win? Where did we lose? Where did we find success? And where did we stumble a little bit in the first 6 months as it pertains to our goals, but also as it pertains to just how we want to do life? Sometimes we set great goals for ourselves, but then it's like little habits sneak in. And they may not seem like they're an issue, like maybe just scrolling on social media before you go to bed. No harm, no foul. It's only 30 minutes, whatever. But then you might realize like, oh, I actually find myself staying up later than I want to. I don't sleep as well. I'm in a really bad mood. I get a lot of anxiety, or I find myself checking out from engaging with my family or my spouse because I'm scrolling on my phone at night. That could be something that maybe doesn't, it's not in direct contrast with your goal, but it is something that is affecting one of the goals that you set for yourself this year. So write that down. Just take stock of your year so far. What was something that was unexpected that happened throughout the year? Write that down, because there are things that maybe you didn't plan for in the first 6 months, whether it was a diagnosis or a move or, you wrecked your car and that's an added expense that you've got to take care of, that you weren't expecting it, you weren't planning on it in 2026. Write that stuff down. We are looking at the game, we're looking at plays, we're looking at tendencies, we're looking at strategies, we're looking at things that happen in the first half that are probably going to show up in the second half, or they have already affected the second half. I think about like a basketball team. You got 5 players on the court, you got your starters, you got your one person that's like your go-to point guard, right? What if they get injured in the first half and they can't play the second half? Unexpected. You were expecting to have this player for the entire game and now you don't. So how do you pivot? How do you focus your attention elsewhere in order to be successful in the second half of the game? And I want you to ask yourself, how am I doing? How is this year going? If I stay on this trajectory, is it going to get me closer to my goals or further away from my goals? If I keep operating the way that I was in the first half of the game, am I going to win or am I going to lose? Like, where do we continue to put our foot on the gas and where do we maybe hit the brakes a few times? That's what you've got to ask yourself, and be honest. This is not a time to judge. This is not a time for you to point fingers, to point at your point guard, to point at your forward, your center, whoever, and be like, it's your fault. You missed this, you missed that. No, 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 no. What's done is done. You can't go back and change anything. All you can do is focus on what you're going to do next. So be honest with yourself, but don't judge yourself, okay? Part of the reason why I think we fail to achieve the things that we want in life or fail to become the person that we want to be in life is because we're just too hard on ourselves. We have these insane expectations of ourselves. And I think there's a wonderful thing of like setting a standard, but then there's also like unrealistic expectations that are just going to hold you back in the long run because they're just impossible, you know? Nobody's going to be perfect. So we got to work with what we got, right? The other thing that happens in a halftime is a regroup, is a re-strategizing. It is setting new objectives. It's saying, here's what happened in the first half. And based on what happened in the first half, here's how we're going to accomplish a win. Here's how we're going to operate in the second half of the game. This is important. This is going back and looking at those original strategies that you had and making adjustments. This is you going back to those goals that you set for yourself and saying, okay, I knew this was ambitious going in, but like, what can I do to maybe get myself closer to that goal? I may not accomplish it in the long run, but gosh, I want to get close. You know, I want to get really close to winning this game. If I cannot win it, it is not going to be a blowout. You know what I mean? So I mentioned to you that there are some goals that I set for myself at the beginning of the year that I'm struggling with. I'm not doing great at. One in particular is I set a goal for myself, a passion goal, very, very ambitious, to finish my book. Finish my book. Now, I did meet with a guy who is a published author, and he kind of like gave me a reality check. But honestly, I was not as strategic as I needed to be in the first half of the year. Like I talk about my reading the Bible in a year thing. I had a goal, I had a plan, I had something that would help me do that with that 1 year Bible, and I have stuck to it. And I have planned ahead for pivots. You know what I mean? The book, not so much. My strategy was picking one Saturday a month and going and writing at the library, or, you know, picking a couple Saturdays and writing at the library. Problem is, this first half of the year, my weekends have been non-existent, from activities to, you know, being out of town, to having people come in and visit, to having a holiday weekend, to going to my high school reunion. It has been really, really hard for me to get a writing session in on a Saturday. As much as I love it, and as much as it's worked in the past, this is not the year that it's working for me. And the problem with saying that I'm going to write on Sundays is the library is not open on Sundays. You know, like I don't have an extra day in the weekend to do this, and I need to be a little more flexible. So as I'm regrouping in my halftime, I'm saying, okay, I need to find another time to do this that makes sense. Where if I do go out of town for the weekend, I didn't lose the weekend. How do I plan ahead? How do I schedule this stuff out? Gosh, I preach this to you all the time. And I'll be honest with you, I have struggled to implement this in my own life, in particular with my book. So I have really, really struggled. And I think part of the reason why, if we can just break this down further, and maybe you'll hear something that sounds the same for you. You know, maybe you haven't scheduled you haven't prioritized and scheduled the thing that you want to accomplish this year, and you haven't found ways to pivot in that scheduling either. But also maybe you've just made the goal bigger than it needs to be. It's not that you set a too ambitious of a goal, because I do think we need to set goals that are outside of our comfort zone, but you've ballooned it. Similar to the US team walking into the round of 16 matchup with Belgium and making the moment bigger than it needed to be. It was already big. But thinking, oh my gosh, like we haven't won rounds of 16s in a long time. We're not known for doing this. And what happens if we lose? And it's in our home country and blah, 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 blah. It became too big. The moment became too big. The game in and of itself was still the game, you know what I mean? But it's the meaning that was attached to it. So I think for us, sometimes like, oh, I want to write this book. Well, then it becomes, well, I have to write the book. And what if the book's not good? And what if it never sells? And what if my idea is stupid? And what if I sit down to write and nothing comes out? Well, all that does is keep me from trying to accomplish the goal. And you might be feeling the same way with whatever goal that you've set for yourself. The other goal that I have set that I've been struggling with, not so much on the planning side of it or the just trying to execute, but I said that I wanted, this was my professional goal. I wanted to make, half of my salary in revenue on social media that I was making with my job. Yeah, still no closer to that. However, I will say this strategy behind it has changed. It may not be the exact dollar amount that's coming in, but it is, how do I just make my audience more engaged? How do I get people to follow me? How do I create this community that I want? Because that will ultimately get me closer to my goal, even if the goal is not happening right now, even if the benchmarks that I set are not being accomplished right now. And you might find the same thing for you. As you're looking ahead at the next 6 months of the year, you might be thinking about a goal that you haven't been accomplishing the way that you expected yourself to, but there is something that's working. There's another aspect of the goal that will help you in the long run. There's something that is moving with that goal that you didn't expect, but you're like, oh, I can work with this. And eventually this is going to help me accomplish this goal. Recognize those things because that is progress. That is something that is going to help you in the long run. And then adjust accordingly. Same thing with a game. You may have a strategy of like, hey, we're going to feed it to Allison, like she's our go-to. We're gonna feed the ball to her because she's our girl that nails the 3-pointers. Well, if Allison is being double teamed and nobody can get a ball to her, like nobody can pass to her, you're gonna have to find somebody else on the team that has the hot hand. And maybe it's not Allison with the hot hand, but maybe it's Bree that has the hot hand. So it's like, okay, we'll get the ball to Bree because she may not be making the 3-pointers, but gosh, she's driving to the hoop and she's scoring, and we just need points on the board. See how there's still progress there? It may not be the original strategy that you set up for yourself, the original game plan. However, there's another way that's going to help you in the long run. And maybe if the team starts to see, your opponents start to see that Bree is scoring a lot, they may shift their strategy, which might open up Allison for some 3-pointers. Does that make sense? A lot of sports analogies. But ultimately, given the new info that you have, giving the intel and the data that you have gathered, aka the first 6 months of the year, how do you pivot? How do you make changes now for more progress in the future? Because the goal here is we are not giving up on our goals. We are not saying, oh, well, 2026 is a wash. We'll try again in 2027. No. We always try to make progress, even if it's minuscule, okay? So ask yourself, you might have to kind of like realign some things here. Ask yourself, like, where did I not make it, but what's working? And what still matters to me? That's another thing. You might set some goals for yourself, and 6 months down the road, you're like, this sounded great at the beginning of the year, but it also, 6 months down the road is starting to feel like this was somebody else's goal. This was somebody else's dream. This isn't what I wanted. Or at least this isn't the process that I wanted to take in order to achieve that goal. You know what I mean? So what is still tugging at you? What is something that you're still passionate about 6 months down the road? That's another thing with like continually striving to make progress, is you're always like fine tuning and honing in on what really matters. So take stock of that, take note, be realistic. You might have had what you thought were big dreams for yourself at the beginning of the year, but now you're starting to realize like you're kind of passionate about something else. You're kind of being tugged in a different direction. It is okay for you to have that realization. It is okay. Like maybe at the beginning of the year, you were shouting your goals from the rooftops. You were posting about it on social media, new year, new me, yada, yada, yada. But now you're like, I don't care about that anymore. And it's not because you failed. It's just because it's not really aligned with who you are or your calling or what you think God has asked you to do with your life or who he's made you. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to make a change. And finally, the other thing that we're going to do that is so beneficial and powerful and meaningful in a halftime situation with a game is we're going to hydrate and recover. We're going to get some fluids. We're going to catch our breath. We're going to wipe the sweat off. We're going to take care of any kind of injuries or pains that we might be feeling from the first half of the game. And we're going to get out there and try harder and play hard because we have taken care of ourselves. I think that's one thing that we forget. And it's so easy for us, as you know, we talk about letting goals kind of fall by the wayside and just coasting through the rest of the year. I think we can just do that with ourselves. And then we end up getting to what is the most wonderful time of the year, the holiday season, and we're depleted. We're empty because we didn't take care of ourselves. And if you want to make it through the second half of the game, you've got to use your halftime to take care of yourself, to recharge your batteries, to regroup, to refuel, to care for yourself, to fill yourself up before you get out there and play again. So take a moment to care for you. Take a moment to recognize the places where you have put yourself on the back burner. I know there's a lot of people out there, moms do this especially. You think taking care of yourself is selfish, but similar to the analogy that I've shared before, like you've got to fill yourself up before you fill other people. It's this idea of this beautiful vase, right? And you've got little vases around it. And if this big vase keeps turning over to fill those vases and it's not completely full itself, it's going to tip so far that it will fall over and break. But if that vase sits there and gets filled with water and that water fills up the vase, eventually it's going to get to the top. It's going to overflow over the brim. And guess what? It's still going to fill those other little vases around it. It just doesn't have to bend over backwards to do it. It is filling those other vases from abundance, from a place of overflow. And that's the ultimate that you want for your life. You want to be fulfilled. You want to be cared for. You want to be healthy so you can be your best version for everybody else. So you can show up and do the job that's set before you well. We talk about running our race a lot. It's a biblical analogy that Paul talks about in the New Testament, like running with endurance, running well, getting rid of the weights that are on you. We just wrapped up our weight dropper series in June. But like that's such a great visual of like, if you can just care for yourself, you will show up so much better in your life. Think of these elite athletes, these guys playing in the World Cup. You think they're eating processed food and McDonald's, fast food and stuff like that? Do you think that they're, not taking time to recover well? Like they're running their bodies ragged. They're not sleeping full nights. Do you think they're doing that? No. They are engaging in the basics of caring for themselves every single day. They're eating the right foods. They're nourishing their body. They're recovering. They're sleeping. They're doing sauna and cold plunge and stretching out. Gosh, we've seen we talked about this last week, so many players reading their Bibles. Like they are filling themselves with the good stuff. They are caring for their bodies and their minds well. So when they step out on that field, they play their best. And you've got to do the same thing with your life. You have got to use your halftime. You have got to use moments, your timeouts, your hydration breaks. You've got to use these moments to fill yourself back up, to care for yourself so you can get back out there and play hard and win. That's what we want to do, right? We want to win. We want to be able to bounce back from setbacks or strikeouts or, interceptions or whatever. Like we want to play well. And that starts with taking care of yourself. So I want you to ask yourself, where did you lose yourself? Ask yourself, where did I lose me? Where did I, cut corners or put myself on the back burner or not prioritize myself? Again, this is not in a selfish way. This is not you being overindulgent. This is not you being lazy and complacent. This is just you recognizing when you're on the verge of burnout. This is recognizing when you're overwhelmed, when you're stressed. And another thing about like moving forward to the second half, recognize that you have a team around you, okay? You got family, you got friends, you've got coworkers, you've got people that if you're overwhelmed, they will help you. So figure out where to delegate, where to pass the ball. You know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be you. Where can you set a boundary? Where can you say, hey, can you help me like set a pick right here so I can get around you and like score this bucket? Like, can you help me with that? So that's another way of taking care of yourself is recognizing where your limits are. You know what I mean? And asking for help in the areas that you need help, seeking out the proper coaches as well. We talk about this a lot, whether it's mentors, family members, books, podcasts, things that help teach you, help guide you a little bit in this process, in this game of life, if you will. And also, re-strategize some ways to maybe work in some more timeouts, to work in some more breaks throughout the next 6 months so you don't get overwhelmed and you don't, end up hurting yourself or overexerting yourself or just running out of gas before the game is done. Okay. We've got incredible opportunities ahead of us. I know that this next year or this next 6 months, it's going to be tough. If you've got kids, they're going to be going back to school. If you've got kids in sports, you're going to be running around being taxi service again. If you, are gung-ho with the holidays, there's going to be a lot, I think about the last hurrah of summer. I think about Halloween. I think about Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. It's all coming. And it's all going to be coming at you so fast. But again, that is not an excuse for you to coast. That is not an excuse for you to take your hands off the wheel and be like, all right, whatever happens, happens. No, be intentional about these next 6 months. But give yourself a little bit of time this week, if I were to give you homework, to do these exercises, to use a little bit of a halftime here, to pause and to reflect and say, okay, how did the first 6 months go? What do I want to do differently in the next 6 months? How can I re-strategize? What new game plan can I draw up for myself? And also take some time to take care of yourself, truly recover before you dive into these next 6 months. Again, we may not achieve all the goals that we set for ourselves at the beginning of the year. It's okay. But we should make some progress. We shouldn't be writing down the exact same things in 2027 that we did in 2026. When January 1st rolls around, we shouldn't be going, all right, starting over again. No, we should be thinking, okay, I'm starting at a new level, a new place. I'm continuing on. I'm adding to. I'm progressing still on this journey that I set for myself. I think we can do some wonderful things in the next 6 months. I think that we can use a lot of intel from the first 6 months to further us along. And I'm excited to see what happens. So again, this week, use it as your halftime, regroup, re-strategize, and take some time out for yourself. And then let's dive back in. Make it a good week for yourself. I'll see you next week.